All right, we are back with another episode of the Quantum Yoga Podcast, and I'm really happy to have Niraj Naik on the program today. Uh, I'm going to actually let you introduce yourself because I'm going to take the long bio. There's just so much that you've been up to and been doing. I'm going to just plug that into the show notes here. But can you introduce yourself for the audience? And because we're going to be talking about the breath, among other things.
Yeah, so my name is Niraj, also known as the Renegade Pharmacist. That's a little title I picked up over the years. I used to actually work as a community pharmacist years ago, um, but I got very disillusioned with the whole healthcare profession. So I wanted to do something about it. And actually, the whole journey of trying to do something about it ended up, I actually got very sick with a chronic illness. I became very good at getting people off drugs, basically. It got fired from a couple of jobs, but then it got me promoted to the head office of a massive corporation. And I was trying to put on this very unique concept to deliver healthy information to the masses, but it got blocked, and I just lost a lot of hope for humanity. Basically, I had a big loss of spiritual kind. I had like a spiritual void in my life, and I ended up getting actually sick with a stress-related illness called ulcerative colitis, which affects your colon. You get these ulcers in your colon. I was housebound for um, literally a year. I was housebound, and I was shitting blood like 40 times a day. It's horrible. And they say that God stands for gift of desperation. And literally, I was in a very desperate state because I was either going to have my colon removed or I was going to be on a guinea pig for a drug that hasn't been tested before. And I was like really like ready to just lose it all. And then came to a rescue, a lady who's a quite well-known yoga teacher in the UK called Swami Kananda, and she runs a traditional yoga association. And she said to me, like, you've got a gift, because if you can heal yourself now with your story, your background, everything you believe in, you have an amazing story to share with other people and be a great role model. So I basically just surrendered to her um, message, and she taught me basically the foundations of yoga, pranayama, Ayurveda, and literally within a few months I was healed completely. It took me on a real deep search into why does this stuff work? What is it about it? And I made a pact that I will do whatever I can to put science to all of this stuff, all this esoteric, holistic stuff that the mainstream don't accept. So I went on a big quest to figure out why does this stuff work, and that took me on this amazing journey. I started traveling around the world, met some amazing people. I used to I live in Koh Phangan like half the year. It's this island in Thailand where it's full of like wellness and yoga centers and lots of yogis. So I went quite deep on things like tantra and yoga there. But I also then ended up meeting some amazing people. One of them was uh, uh, along with my Swami, who's an amazing next level superhuman. I met this guy called Wim Hof, who a lot of you have probably heard of, and he became a good friend of mine. And what I really got passionate about was music. So music was the thing that I found really helped me um, a lot with the stress levels. And I used to combine like yoga and pranayama techniques with music, and that actually became my first business. And I ended up making also the soundtracks of the Wim Hof method. I produced all his audios and stuff. We went pretty deep. Like I lived with him for a while, and we did some crazy stuff together. So I went really. He's a scientist, so I learned a lot of science side to fitness and well-being through yoga and kind of these ancient techniques that he's been involved with. And but then what really was the icing on the cake was when I got invited by this doctor in India who lives in the Himalayas, who he basically has a clinic center where he uses yoga and pranayama techniques to heal patients. He's a proper qualified doctor. You know, he uses a mixture of allopathic and holistic medicine, but he has amazing results just with these ancient techniques. And he taught me this ancient form of Himalayan yoga, which is like a very traditional form of yoga, like very different to what you see in the mainstream today. And then he taught me all the science behind it. And we're working together now, and that's actually the core foundation of this online training school that I've created called Soma, somabreath.com, which is basically bringing in the best of these ancient modalities into one system. And then we teach people how to do it and instruct people. And it's become an amazing experience from doing that. But what also I realized was there's a lot of hidden knowledge in the Vedic scriptures and the Upanishads and the Rig Veda, and in there's this legend of Soma, and there's a beautiful story about the legend of Soma, which is there was a time in the golden age of humanity where people lived in abundance and people lived for much longer periods of time, and they lived in harmony with nature. So what do you do at this time? You start taking psychedelics. So they were consuming a lot of psychedelics, which they labeled Soma, and Soma was like this plant concoction. Nobody quite knows exactly what it is, but you know, it's probably the magic mushroom, or maybe it's just a whole catch name for all types of psychedelics that gets you into these divine ecstatic states. And through this, they would enter into the spirit world and they'd speak to gods in the heavens and download all the knowledge that helped create humanity and civilization. But however, the rishis start moving around the world, and as that happens, the soma starts running out. So they all freak out because they're all addicted to the soma. So this is when they go inwards. God Indra instructs everyone, go inwards to find the soma within. And through that, they realize actually we have every single substance that exists in nature, every drug, every medicine, everything that exists in nature, we can already like produce analogs to it in our bodies endogenously. And the way to do that is with the breath. The breath is the lock, the key to unlock the inner pharmacy. So what Soma really is all about that. It's about finding your inner pharmacy, and there's a lot of science now that backs up everything I'm talking about. So yeah, we can go deep on that.
Oh my God. Can we be friends, Neeraj? I mean, I feel like, by the way, I should say that my good friend who I previously interviewed, Jeff Tarrant, Dr. Jeff Tarrant.
Oh, he's my friend as well. He's just the neuroscientist.
Yeah, the neuroscientist. And so after doing
It was a small world.
Yeah, so
he's doing experiments with me right now.
Yeah, he mentioned that because I saw him anyways a couple weeks ago. He was in town for running some tests on something, and he said, "Hey, you need to talk to Neeraj. I'm doing his breathing thing right now." And he's like, "I'm actually really surprised at how profound it is." And I was like, "Hey, if Jeff's telling me this, I'm paying attention." And so in addition to that, you know, we've also interviewed Casper van der Meulen, who I think is one of the lead trainers, still is for Wim Hof.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you have that connection as well, and you can speak to that, because part of the listener contingency are people we could kind of call biohackers. And Wim has definitely made an impact in the biohacking community because he's packaged up some kind of breathing technique that is accessible. It makes sense. Like you said, it's backed by science, and it's drawing upon these ancient lineages.
Yes.
And so, man, where do we even start? Perhaps we can start at, telling us, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah. I mean, I can talk to you about, firstly, like when you understand the foundation of what yoga is, okay, then everything makes a lot of sense. So what happened was, when everyone went into it, the thing they created was these series of practices that you do, these rituals, okay? And the name of that is Tantra. So Tan actually means body. And so it's all to do with the body. So from Tantra came yoga. Yoga was the philosophy. And the idea of yoga is becoming aligned from the inner world to the outer world. That's the goal of yoga, is your inner world to align with your outer world, and to get into flow, right? So um, the if you look at this from a scientific perspective, how do we create the soma within? Okay, so the soma within, you could say, is like all the feel-good hormones, the bliss molecules, the spirit molecule, like DMT, okay, which is basically similar to serotonin, right? And it's produced, well, actually, nobody even knows really where it's produced, but we produce tryptamines in the pineal gland, okay, so we know that. And, you know, in yoga, there's all these different third eye awakening techniques and all this, especially in Tantra. Tantra has a lot to do with awakening the third eye, okay, the pineal gland, waking up the power of the third eye consciousness. But what does that really mean? So basically, what they've shown, and this is what they've shown in studies, is that, and Harvard did a study on this, that when you lower the oxygen levels in the bloodstream, okay, to a certain level, then DMT comes in to help the cell survive in a low concentration of oxygen, okay? So DMT kind of stabilizes the cell to allow it to survive longer, okay? And it has this kind of protective mechanism, DMT does, for low, particularly for low oxygen levels. Now, if you look at the most revered breathing technique of all in pranayama, pranayama basically means energy control, right? Through breathing, you control the energy in the body. Well, it's called kumbhaka. Kumbhaka is breath retention, holding your breath, okay? Now, if you can hold your breath for a certain period of time and not die, right, and not pass out, okay, what happens is you lower the oxygen levels, the blood saturation in your bloodstream, to a point where the DMT comes into play, and it produces this very, very euphoric, blissful awakening experience, like you've just done something like mushrooms, or, you know, I wouldn't say ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is like very, very otherworldly. It's a whole different realm to compare. But people do who do Soma, actually. My practice, Soma, actually compare it to things like ayahuasca and mushrooms and things like that. So I've done everything. I've done every psychedelic under the sun, and I would say that you can get pretty close with breathing, but it's not going to be the same. But what you can do is feel really, really good, and you can actually make yourself healthier, and you can have that divine connection and those divine downloads. You can get to that state of mind. Maybe you don't see the same things, but you can get to that state of mind. So anyway, so what happens in pranayama is, if you look at it from a science, it's actually all about controlling the oxygen in your bloodstream. All of the pranayama techniques is all about controlling levels of oxygen in your bloodstream and making it possible for you to hold your breath for very long periods of time. And the byproducts of that, the positive side effects of that, is you become more efficient at using oxygen. So the more efficient you can become at using oxygen means the less oxygen you need. And why is that important? The reason why that's important is the same reason why the yogis go and live in the Himalayas at high altitudes where the oxygen levels are very low. It's the same reason why the Nepalese Gurkha army is the world's strongest army, and why the British and the Americans use them to win their battles. It's the same reason why the Russians have been studying high altitude training for so long to make their athletes the strongest in the world. It's because when you lower the oxygen level in the bloodstream, you create this process called intermittent hypoxia. This triggers this positive stress response in the body, creates a cascade of adaptive responses to less oxygen. You get more red blood cells, your blood vessels dilate, you get more blood flow to your brain and your heart. You can actually even create something called coronary cholesterol, which is natural bypasses in the heart. So actually, these are ways that they figured out 1,000 years ago to stop you getting heart attacks, okay, from blocked arteries. And So, so that's one of the benefit effects. The other benefit effect is becoming very efficient with oxygen means you need to breathe less. The less you breathe means there's less chance of oxidative stress in the body. Okay, now oxygen, we've all been kind of under this illusion that it's your best friend and we need loads of it. And, you know, if that was a truth, then doctors would be healing everyone with pure oxygen cylinders, but they're not. So it's not the oxygen, it's actually getting the right balance of oxygen. And the less we need to breathe means there's less chance of this oxidative stress, which actually Harvard have also done studies on this. You can look up study where it talks about how your body rusts, right? And basically in your bloodstream, we can get actual rusting effects similar to what happens with metal in, you know, when it's exposed to air, oxidation. And it can lead to plaques, cell damage and plaques forming, which then leads to blocks and artery blocks and heart disease. So actually, the less we breathe, the longer we live. And you can see this in animals, okay? Like this is what yogis did. They used to observe animals in nature. And they observed that very fast breathing animals, like rodents and stuff, they don't live very long. But animals that respire very slowly live much longer, like elephants and things like that. And humans, we have a conscious ability to control our breath. We can either breathe very fast if we want consciously, or we can slow it right down and hold our breath, right? But it's also under the involuntary control, right, of our autonomic nervous system, okay? So our reptilian brain controls our respiration. Now, the thing with that is that most people are living a very unconscious existence, okay? They're just surrendering to the reptilian brain. And the reptilian brain is subjected to stress. So when you are in a stressful situation, your breathing automatically changes to adapt to that stressful situation, even though if it's like an emotional stress. So think about this, like thousands of years ago, we lived in tribes and we were living in jungles, okay? And there were lions and tigers and bears. We had a different kind of stress. We didn't have so much emotional stress. We had physical, like, threats to our existence. So we had this flight or fight mechanism that quickly kicked into gear to either run away, right, or to defend, right? And as soon as you got rid of the stress, the body calms down, the nervous system calms down. Fast forward to now, we are surrounded by different form of stress, emotional stress, okay? Like instead of lions, tigers, and bears, instead of living in jungles, we're now living in concrete jungles with EMFs and all that stuff. And we're also got bosses to deal with. We've got, relationships that aren't working, got bills to pay, mortgages to pay, and all this stuff. So we're actually constantly switched on. Like our fear mode is constantly switched on. Reptilian brain actually can't tell the difference between emotional stress and physical stress. It perceives it the same way. And we can't go out and just defend ourselves instantly. We're not going to stab our boss, even though we may really feel like it at times. Okay. So we have to just constantly be subjected to emotional stress. I felt this working in a corporate head office, and it was horrible way of life. And I was constantly being triggered all the time. So the problem with that is then your breathing goes into overdrive. You start to respire like you're exercising and you're about to go into battle. So you breathe a lot faster. And what happens when you breathe a lot faster and you breathe from your mouth, particularly, you stimulate the sympathetic nervous response in the throat, and that triggers adrenaline and cortisol, vasoconstriction, and that leads to all the chronic stress problems we've got in the world. So actually, and then that also leads to the oxidative stress from too much over breathing. So the yogis figured out the off switch for stress, okay? And they devised the system called pranayama, which was ways for you to use your breath to influence your autonomic nervous system, to calm it down, to actually create an adrenaline, but good positive stress if you want. So it can be like your own natural steroids and anti-inflammatories. You can also lower your blood pressure and lower your heart rate and do all those things just with the power of breathing. Because for many years, we've been conditioned into believing that we have no control over our autonomic nervous system. Okay. Well, this is complete bullshit. Like the yogis have been using these yoga techniques to control the autonomic nervous system for thousands of years. And in the 70s, Swami Rama, he went over from India and he went under scientific investigation, and he basically stopped his heart rate for 12 seconds. He did all kinds of weird shit, raised his core body temperature one side up by a few degrees, the other side down a few degrees, and all kinds of weirdness. And Wim Hof, he's another guy who's recently, in more recent times, had some scientific investigations done that shows that he has voluntary control over those functions. I did it when I healed myself from the chronic illness, you know. So we know that we can control this, and the drug companies basically have the control at the moment over your autonomic nervous system, because they basically give you the blood pressure pill to lower your blood pressure. They give you, you know, steroids to give you anti-inflammatories. They give you shots of adrenaline, and these things in some cases can work miracles. They can be useful, but if we're always dependent on that, then they're going to lead to side effects, because drugs aren't smart and they have side effects. But our own innate intelligence is where the magic really lies. So yoga really is a system, if you really follow it like how it was traditionally taught, to tap into your autonomic nervous system so you can regain more control over your physiology. And then, because then through that alignment, your inner world becomes your outer world, and then everything becomes more peaceful. Yeah.
Wow. So yeah, I love that. So many questions. I guess the first one, because you mentioned lowering oxygen levels, and I think I may have seen on your website that you do measure that as a way. There's an objective measure like SpO2 with a finger sensor. Do you have a threshold that you aim to get to?
Yeah. You just need to get the hypoxic benefits. You just need to go below 90%, actually. All right. Now, here's the other side effect that can happen of intermittent hypoxia, positive one. Now, Russian scientists have shown in certain studies that systemic hypoxia can trigger the release of stem cells from niches in the body, which are low oxygen environments, into the bloodstream. And stem cells have the ability to go and turn into any other cell that's needed to heal, repair, lower inflammation and things like this. Innate intelligence, they go to the areas that needs the healing, right? And so when you get the hypoxic level low enough, then stem cells can come out. That's another reason for being able to hold your breath for long periods of time and be really efficient using oxygen, because you can then bring the stem cells out of circulation. However, it's not 100% conclusive, but I've seen with my own self, like rapid healing. I've seen this with our community. I've read lots of studies on this. It makes a lot of sense. And if you just look at, sometimes some things don't even need to be fully proven, because you can see it technically for what it is, and you can see the mechanism. So stem cells are in the most abundance when you're in the womb. Okay, when you're dividing, and that environment is extremely low in oxygen. It's like a hypoxic environment. It's like the top of Everest sort of levels of oxygen. So stem cells hate oxygen. Okay, they hate it. That's why as soon as you're born and you take that first breath, the stem cells move away and they go and find niches in the body which are very low oxygen environments. So certain cell, like muscles, tissue, have healthy cells. Well, I wouldn't say health. I'd say normal cells, which consume lots of oxygen. In this middle would be a stem cell, which is protected from the oxygen. And then you'll have the bone marrow, which is very low in oxygen, but very rich in stem cells. And the stem cells usually only come out under times of stress. So hypoxic conditions being created. So one of them is exercise. If you do a very intense exercise and you create that burn, you create hypoxia, right? Then the stem cells will come out and help grow stronger muscle tissue, okay? Now, this is the other thing. So yoga, in my opinion, is a science of creating hypoxia, right? Making every cell in your body, the mitochondria, super efficient at using oxygen, all right? Here's why. So really what yoga should be is a static contraction exercise. So what that means is that if you contract your muscle like that, right, and you just hold it, and you hold it maximum contraction, then it shuts off the blood supply to that muscle. So if you do that, then no more oxygen can flow to that muscle. And if you do that to the point of exhaustion, then this forces your muscle to adapt because it triggers hypoxia, stem cells release, and it forces your muscles to become firstly more efficient using oxygen, but it also basically makes you more mitochondria, produce more myoglobin, you get more natural reserves, you become healthier, and they have better stamina and all these things. So yoga really originally was done where you hold each pose to the exhaustion point, right? Because it's anaerobic exercise. That's what you're trying to go for, anaerobic exercise, in the absence of oxygen. Whereas most yoga you see today is aerobic. It's like vinyasa. You go from one posture to the next within a few seconds. And that's more like an aerobic workout. And maybe it's going to be beneficial for a little bit for the cardiovascular system, but nowhere near what it could do for you if you do actual real kind of traditional yoga. So this is what I got taught in, and I learned. It made so much more sense, and you become more flexible much quicker as well. Like I found it a struggle to get quickly flexible to when I'm doing vinyasa type stuff back in the day. But as soon as I tried this form of yoga where you're using breath retention techniques and raising carbon dioxide, doing kumbhaka into each pose, that's when I started to really become flexible. So
that's fascinating. So so asana is a part of your system that you build into. You're using asana with pranayama.
Yeah, well, the first level at the moment is to do with breath. So it's all about correcting the breathing. And it's really learning about the science of breathing, and because I think that's the first easiest thing to correct, and it can really give you a very powerful healing effect just through the breath alone. So that's a hook, it gets people in. But the next level we're bringing out, and I'm creating this with Swami Ambikananda, is the Soma yoga side, which is this traditional Himalayan style of yoga. And we're doing it at our retreats at the moment, but we haven't officially launched it yet. But that's the new way of doing yoga. But it's kind of boring, because, well, for the very fast ADHD mindset of people these days, they will find it boring. That's the slight issue we got. I don't know if it's going to be the most mainstream acceptable form of yoga because you're holding each pose like a meditation. So
for roughly how long?
For exhaustion, so you can't hold it any longer.
So you'll have a group of people, and some people will be holding longer than others, and you're just kind of.
That's one of the things with it. Yeah, it becomes more of a personal practice that you do yourself, because you may after a while become so good at holding certain poses. Like I quickly became very good at certain poses, and I can hold them significantly longer now than I used to be able to, but it means that then you may be doing one pose for like 5-10 minutes, and then then you may only do about 4 or 5 poses in a session versus the traditional yoga. Well, sorry, not traditional, the mainstream yoga.
Would you be able to give us an example of an asana pose and how you would breathe in that?
Yeah. I mean, very simple one is the forward bend. So imagine that's your legs, right? That's your upper body. Okay. So most people struggle to bend forward and touch their toes. Okay. The reason why is because they're too tense. The muscles are too tense. And the best actual way to get loose and supple and flexible is nitric oxide being released. Okay, so this is the thing with when you slow the breathing down and you breathe through your nose, you start to produce nitric oxide, which is a dilator. Okay, vasodilator. So if you breathe in and exhale, you can even do it through your nose into the pose and hold, and then breathe again. You'll find you'll be able to go into the bend quick, easier than maybe the first time you've ever touched your toes. A lot of people who do this style, they touch their toes for the first time they've ever done it. And it's because you're releasing nitric oxide. So the goal of that, the way to do that is just extending the exhale slowly into each pose, holding it for a few seconds, and then back into it again.
And
And then when you get to the final stretch where you can't really go any further down, you can just hold it and hold your breath as long as you can in that position. And it's pretty hard at first, but you quickly start to relax. Carbon dioxide raises, the muscles dilate, blood vessels dilate, everything becomes loose. So yeah.
there's a distinction that that I'm aware of because I teach yoga, but maybe the listeners aren't, where the kumbhaka is different. Than the kumbhaka is the hold, not necessarily the exhalation. And so are you saying that when you're entering in and you're moving towards your baseline flexibility, you're doing long exhales for, is that a prescribed amount of time, or is it as long as you can? And then once you reach your baseline flexibility, you're exhaling faster, but holding the breath for as long as you can.
Yeah, you could do it like that. And so what we focus on a lot is Richaka Kumbhaka on forward bends. So that's extended exhalation, extending your exhalation and holding on after exhalation. That's called Rechaka. And you basically always do that on forward bends. But when you do back bends, so say you do Cobra, okay, you would hold your breath in and you'd apply the Mula Bandha, you'd lock the Mula Bandha and you'd send the energy up to your third eye. Because what it does is it stimulates a current up into that area, okay? And when you're holding your breath like that, something happens, man. Like you get these flashes of like inspiration and lights go off.
Yeah, backbends are my favorite. It's crazy how instantaneous they can change your state, and it's phenomenal. So wow, I'm sorry to be technical about this, but it's so fascinating to me how you're programming this thing. Is when you are moving into your forward bends, we'll say as the example, the initial phase of that, how long are people exhaling for? Is there a prescribed amount of time, or is that self-modulated, self-regulated kind of?
The slower is better. Like obviously you're not going to go too slow like a snail, but
I see.
you just flow into it. It's like a flow. Yeah. But there's also a reason for doing very slow exhales. Okay. This is really good for digestion. So if you're in meditation, and it's actually cleanses the bloodstream. So if you sit in like a lotus position and you breathe in fully in from the belly, and you make very slow exhalation, either through your nostrils. Not everyone can do nostrils, but through your mouth at least, like you're blowing through a small straw. Really slow it down, really slow it down. Okay, and just meditate on that breath, the exhalation. What happens is it creates this back pressure of oxygen. Okay, and it first, because it slows down the rate of oxygen coming back in, it allows the carbon dioxide to rise, and this balances the nervous system. Okay, because we need to get oxygen into your cells of your body. Okay, you need carbon dioxide. It's the Bohr effect. So when you create that back pressure and you gently exhale very slowly, okay, the carbon dioxide raises from respiration and then allows the oxygen to enter into the cells. It creates that diffusion gradient. So that's why one of the reasons for just slowly exhaling, and even just consciously, when you're consciously breathing, just extend your exhalation. Because also when you exhale, you stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. And we've gone a little bit deeper with this. So in Soma, the foundation is rhythmic breathing. That's what Soma is about. So where we're different from everyone else out there doing breathing stuff is I'm all about the rhythm, and I use music to guide the breath. So the music gets you into these very, very hypnotic trance states. But what you're doing is you're breathing in a perfect rhythm to the music. Okay, so there's a reason for that. So when you breathe in, you stimulate the sympathetic nervous system. When you breathe out, you stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. So when you breathe in and out in the perfect rhythm, you actually create a phenomenon called coherence, heart coherence, which Heart Math did a lot of work on. And it brings your emotions into balance. So emotions, I like to use the word, the saying, emotion is energy in motion. Okay, but that's really what it is. We experience life through an emotion, through hormones being produced in the nervous system, that creates a feeling or a drive or an action towards something. That's basically our life is a series of emotions and movements and motions. So at the cornerstone of all that is energy. Okay, so when you're breathing in a rhythm, you start to harmonize functions in your body that and everything operates through energy. Okay, so every single function of the body has a rhythm to it. Your circadian rhythm, your infradian, ultradian rhythm, they're all rhythms. Okay, so that's your things like the menstrual cycle for women, our sleep-wake cycle, our metabolic cycle. All of these things are cycles. But each one of those rhythms are subservient to the rhythm of your breath. The breath is the primary rhythm that controls all of these other and brings them into harmony or throws them off. So when you're stressed, your breathing goes erratic, throws off the other rhythms in your body. So when you go into a rhythmic breathing, that's why Soma Foundation Rhythmic Breathing, it brings harmony to everything. Okay. Here's another benefit of doing this as well. When you breathe in, okay, you actually move cerebrospinal fluid to the brain, okay, and when you breathe out, it drains it. So it becomes a pump for the lymphatic drainage system, okay, of your whole body, but very much your brain. Okay, actually in pranayama they call it Bhastrika. Well, I've gone a bit deeper into Bhastrika and made this rhythmic Bhastrika instead of this, as a lot of people do, which still works. I like to keep it smooth. Like that, to a rhythm, to a beat. Perfect groove. And it's so much better, man. You don't get the stress induced from, like one of the problems, like with the Wim Hof method, like, I mean, I love it. It's amazing. Is that most people are already quite stressed out. So when you're doing a lot of stress-inducing breathing techniques, Kundalini Yoga also has this problem, which creates a lot of fire. Like most humans don't need fire. Maybe very depressed, apathetic people might need a bit of their adrenaline's kicked into gear a bit of a shock. Actually, the Wim Hof method is amazing for depression. People who are like just lazy and shit and need their ass kicked into gear by Mr. Hof, which is very good motivation. But it does like people who are very charged up already, like they need slightly different breathing techniques. Soma, I try to make it so it's accessible to everyone. So it's kind of it's not one size fits all, because not everyone will want to do it. Some people may need the Wim Hof style stuff, more fiery stuff. The Soma is definitely more rhythmical. Our focus is a lot more on the exhales and holding your breaths and the breath retentions. In this is our awakening. We've got a whole series of different breathing techniques, but the signature one is the awakening experience, which is this rhythmic breathing and kumbhaka, focusing on the exhales, lowering the oxygen levels, and maintaining that state of hypoxia so that we can wake up the DMT spirit molecules and all that. But that takes a bit of training to get to that point.
You mentioned HeartMath, and I've interviewed HeartMath and Roland McCready. And so going back to the rhythmic breathing, they're very much about a 10-second breath and 5 in, 5 out.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about that, if you're not, is you can breathe different amounts of breath over that period of time. And so I wonder if that matters. In your opinion, do you see that? So as you were saying, when you're doing more of a yogic style breathing, it's especially if you're oriented towards meditation, it's very little breath that is flowing in and out. But for the average person breathing this way, they're going to breathe, most similarly to how they already breathe, which is a lot more volume of air coming in and out. Do you have an opinion on this?
I think for the short period of time that you're doing it, it's fine. And I think it's good because it exercises the lymphatic system. It moves cerebrospinal fluid when you do big diaphragmatic breathing, like big volumes. But all the time, no, you shouldn't be doing that all the time. You should actually be shallow breathing, which is another contradiction. You don't need to, but you do, though. This is the thing. Some people need the oxygen. Remember, so here's a great analogy. So the mitochondria is like a furnace burning, right? Like it burns oxygen and glucose together to produce fire, which is ATP, which is a form of light energy in the body. So imagine we're all light energy. Everything is light. ATP is the currency of light, okay, that moves energy through the body. And just like a real fire, too much oxygen, look at California, right? Wildfires. The fire burns too bright and that causes oxidative stress. Too little oxygen, the fire doesn't burn at all. So we need the right balance of oxygen. So some people don't have enough oxygen, actually. They're not breathing. They've got very inefficient mitochondria. So they need more of that. They may need a bit more breathing, deeper breathing. They may be not adapted yet physically. They may not have the stamina and the red blood cell count to do very slow breathing, and then they get low energy and they feel foggy and all that shit. That's why yoga asanas are very important, to get your whole body into shape as well, so that you can become more healthy and have more physical fitness. So, it's a very amazing science, man, yoga. Like, it's set out in a way where everyone can do it, everyone should do it, and it takes you through the right protocols to become very efficient using oxygen. So then eventually you'll breathe very less. And you'll know how to breathe in certain situations. Yeah.
You made a point earlier, which I think is so crucial. And I'm like, I don't know why I didn't really think about this before, which is that there is going to be sort of a personalized breathing for each condition in a way. And if you could maybe even categorize, if we just look at psycho-emotional states, we can perhaps categorize, you were saying depression, apathy, this will benefit more from a more stimulating type of breath, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
One second, my daughter's daughter coming through. Hi.
Awesome.
And whereas the opposite may be true for someone who is in an OCD pattern, in an ADHD pattern, in a hyper focused pattern, tasking all the time, more oriented towards busy life and this type of stress. And stress has kind of got different qualities to it, right? And so that's one of the things too that Jeff has done so brilliantly, is say, hey, there are different meditations for different pathologies, if you will.
Yes.
And so what I hear you saying is that you can apply the same rubric to pranayama.
Yeah. Pranayama is like a pharmacy toolbox of different breathing techniques for different things, different uses. So there's energizing breath work. There's stuff that lowers your nervous system and calms you down. And actually one of my favorite ones of all is the most famous of all, which is the Om, chanting Om, okay, and using tones. So one of the problems we have in the world today is humans are extremely like lower chakra driven, right? Men especially, right? And that's actually one of the things that leads to things like ADHD and all this kind of nervous tension. We have too much energy stored down here, all right? And it's not being used in the right way. It's been overused and things like that. And this is our creative energy, the creative force, which is the sexual energy and the digestive organs, which produce, all the nutrients from food, the digestive fire. So Om, actually, this is going to blow your mind, right? It's three, you probably already know, it's 3 syllables, ah, u, Like, did you know that each part of the body corresponds to a different Vedic god? So Brahma is the sound of is the lower dances. So when you make that sound, you put intention, you'll feel the vibration down there. Okay. And Brahma's the creator, right? So all the creativity goes there, right? Vishnu's the heart. Vishnu. So all the syllables are in the words of the names of the gods. So when you chant ooh, you'll feel the vibration there in your heart. Ooh, like that. And when you do there's Shiva, like, or Mahesha. Mahesha is the other name. You'll feel the vibration up there. And when you do it as a sequence, you go from Brahma, Vishnu to Shiva, you create actually a circuit of energy. And what you're also doing is when you're chanting, you're extending your exhalation. All right. So that alone is correcting the oxygen levels and carbon dioxide levels. But that vibration stimulates the glands. So that chant, actually, that vibration stimulates the production in those glands. So when you do it as a sequence, actually it's like you're sending energy right from the root up through your body and round, and subliming this energy down here, the creative force, into your mind. So instead of it all just being there and not being properly intellectualized and used, in a creative, productive way, okay? And ADHD is like a lot of nervous tension where the energy is just flying around all over the place. There's no logic to it. Just by doing some Om chanting like this, okay, can actually be really healing for problems like that. Really healing, especially for like people who have a lot of stored sexual energy. It can help. That's what foundation of Tantra is, actually, for you to use this powerful creative force that we have, which is sexual energy and digestive power, for a higher purpose, to actually move this energy up to the brain so we can use it for a more worthwhile pursuit.
I love that. I about a year ago started practicing Bija mantra a lot for each chakra, and what this thing that kind of really unlocked the power of it for me was to be feeling for and waiting for the vibration to occur in that area, you know, whatever the chakra was, before moving on to the next one.
Yeah.
And that was just so, I don't know, that really landed for me. And once that started happening and I was getting that, not only did it occur more often, being able to feel the vibration in each one of these locations, it occurred more often. There was a, I don't know, a greater, more harmonized sense of self, for lack of
Yeah.
better phrasing, you know, that it just really was quite profound.
Oh yeah, it is. It's amazing. Vibration, man. Sound, vibration, and breath. Secrets to the universe.
So let's see here. We've talked a little bit about the breath. Now let's just tell the listeners, like, if they want to do this course, how do they do that? Where do they go?
Yeah. So we have a great webinar that everyone should watch. It's free. You just go to somabreath.com/awaken. And in there, you'll learn all about how to awaken your inner pharmacy. And it goes through all of the tricks. I don't have my pulse oximeter on me, but I show you how to raise your heart rate and lower your heart rate, you know, in seconds by will alone. You know, showing that we have conscious control of the involuntary functions in the body, like your heart rate, so we can create your own blood pressure pills if you want. So we show that, and then we talk a little bit about the legend of Soma, and then we go into an actual 25-minute experience of the awakening, which basically is this sequence of rhythmic, coherence, breath work, followed by kumbhaka. And we have like a daily dose. You do a couple of rounds of it, and it gives you that dose of hypoxia that really helps you become more adaptive to oxygen. So you need less oxygen. Oxygen is the one thing that causes, it's the one of the hidden things that we're not aware about that causes the most problems on the planet. And yogis who live in the Himalayas, they don't get sick like we do. They don't suffer from the degenerative diseases that we do. And you'll see some of the longest living people live in higher altitude areas where the oxygen levels are low. There's a different type of atmosphere. And remember, what we're doing, what we're consuming the most on a daily basis is the air that we breathe. So, you know, by checking in with that and using your breath consciously is probably one of the best things you can do for your health and well-being. You know, like, especially if you live in a city. Like, I've moved away from the tropical climate and come to the city right now in Barcelona. Even though this is such a beautiful place, I'm really feeling like the change, you know, in climate. So, you know, like, our tools are all about helping you be more prepared for changes and to be more adapted to stress, and also have this go-to system for bliss and well-being at a touch of a button. You know, like, I've made this music that powers the whole thing. It's beautiful to listen to, and you just put on your headphones, and it's the most powerful form of meditation you're ever going to experience. Yeah.
One more question, because after looking at your Soma Breath website, I didn't realize there's sort of another persona that you have online of the Renegade Pharmacist, that whole website. And I saw that you're a big proponent of colostrum.
Yeah.
And so can you take a couple minutes and talk about that?
Yeah. Well, colostrum is the reason why cows are considered holy in India, believe it or not. So the Ayurvedic physicians, thousands of years ago, they knew that there's two types of milk. There's the first milk, which is this yellow, sticky kind of liquid, kind of gooey, and tastes actually very delicious. And then there's the normal milk, right? And that colostrum, if a cow doesn't get enough of it when it's born, it's not able to digest the food that an adult would consume, and then they don't live very long. However, same thing goes with humans. The first milk that we consume when we're babies is called colostrum. It's the same thing. Women produce 2 types of milk. All right. Now, the thing is, if you don't get enough colostrum as a child, same problems happen. You get digestive problems. You can't digest lactose. You can't digest gluten. You can't do, there's all sorts of problems you get your digestive system. It also helps the immune system in that it carries over antibodies from the mother to the baby. It gives you your immune system. Most of your immune system's in your gut anyway. Your serotonin is mostly produced in your gut. Okay, like 90% of serotonin is produced in your gut. So this heals the gut. It literally comes in and it heals the gut. Now, you don't need to get pregnant mother's colostrum, okay? Cows produce way more colostrum, okay, than the calf needs. 4 times more colostrum than the calf needs. And where we get our colostrum from, we make sure that the calves get enough. And what happens is then the excess is stored, freeze-dried. Some of it goes to other calves who aren't getting enough. And the excess of that is used for human consumption. So the Ayurvedic doctors, they were like super profound. They actually, colostrum was a staple part of the Hindu diet. Like it was integral. All the holy sweets were made from colostrum. The temple. Then over years, India got, rampaged. They got raped and pillaged. They got taken over by many different nations, and then the British completely destroyed the culture, like the backbone of the culture, just burnt all of their religious manuscripts and knowledge, and they had so much knowledge. There's so much knowledge in India that's been stolen about stuff like this. And now, only now in the last like 30-40 years, really has science started to go into colostrum as a healing substance. And so I had ulcerative colitis, right? And when I told you I went into Ayurveda, I discovered this about colostrum. And it's called Gal Piyush. And I discovered it, and that was it. I tried it, and the bleeding stopped. And within a week, I was feeling so much better. And now I recommend it to everyone. Like, it's anyone who has gut problems, I recommend it. Okay, it's not vegan. That's the only problem. It's not vegan.
Have you heard of anyone not being able to tolerate it or sort of reacting negatively to it?
You get some cases where people say that they've had but I just think that they're on so many different things. It's hard to say if it was a colostrum alone. It could be anything. But actually, what we have seen, the positive side to it, is that people are able to consume foods that they weren't able to consume before, like lactose, dairy, and gluten and wheat and things like that, because they've fixed the lining of the gut.
I will make sure that the link to that is in the show notes as well. And my gosh, Neeraj, thank you. Thank you for your time, and good luck with everything.
Thank you, man. It's amazing. Great interview.